A very warm welcome to all the people who have joined us, and we'll be beginning this session with a man who needs no introduction, Professor Dinesh Singh, who is a visiting professor with us at Shulman University. He is also former Vice Chancellor at Delhi University. He has done a lot of work in the field of mathematics, be it international publications, journals, and he has been awarded with numerous awards. So I'll just request Dr. Dinesh to give his thoughts on, the global strides in the fight against COVID-19. So over to you, Professor Dinesh.
Global strides, the fight against COVID, global strides. I wanted to understand what global strides are. And again, let me at the outset make a full disclosure. I am no expert on COVID. I'm no expert on scientific achievements. I'm speaking purely as a layperson. So please take what I say in that light. And I will try my best to distill what little I have understood in the fight against COVID so that a layperson could be better informed. And those who are experts may feel that I have done a poor job. You'll have to excuse me right at the beginning. All I tried to do was track some interesting developments in the fight against COVID across the globe. And I came across some very interesting things which have not caught the attention of mainstream media. And I thought I should start with some of those things. But for the last few days, I have been sort of using social media such as WhatsApp and Twitter to also highlight and illustrate what is happening on the COVID front in Delhi. And I thought that I can take this occasion because I believe largely, if not entirely, the audience here is from Delhi. In any case, it would be of interest to anyone on what is happening on the COVID front in Delhi and what exactly is the way to look at things. Very briefly, with your permission, Gyantosh, I'll first speak a little bit about Delhi and how one can use simple data in very simple ways, not complicating anything, to understand the situation. So why did I choose to speak today a little bit first on Delhi? Because I saw some dramatic changes happening in Delhi. On the 6th of May, I had been tracking for the past week the data for Delhi through several sources. So it's important not to rely on only one source of data. It gives you better insight. You can see things in a better way. And so I've been tracking Delhi data along several parameters, several different sources. And when you triangulate this data, triangulation simply means this, that you try and box the real picture around a convex region formed by different data points, so that if you can narrow down the region, then the truth lies inside that region and you are pretty close to the truth. ये सत्य की खोज है. जीवन का भी ध्येय यही रहता है, सत्य की खोज. We're all looking for the truth, and to find the absolute truth is something like finding God, as Mahatma Gandhi said. So that would be really far off, but we can start approximating to the truth, and that's what I was trying to do by triangulating data. So, I'll give you the data points, the sources of data that I was looking at. Of course, first of all, I was looking at the official data on the number of infections in Delhi day by day, new infections. So let me be clear. When I say infections, I simply mean each day how many new infections have come about in the Delhi region, the state of Delhi. And I had seen, so week before 6th May, I had seen that the curve for new infections, particularly the 7-day rolling average, had begun to take a definite slope. There will be some ups and downs, but I had tested this model at Dharavi in the first wave. So in small regions, these models work very nicely. They will be very accurate. In Dharavi, I was accurate almost to the exact date. I had predicted a certain date. on which I had said the number of infections will be less than 10, and it happened the way I think it was supposed to happen. So it seems to work, and I was trying to do that now for Delhi, which is a slightly larger region, not slightly, much larger region, but where data sources could still be obtained with a reasonable degree of accuracy. So I was looking at the 7-day rolling average, and I looked at the slope of the curve. Slope literally means the slope like the slope in a slide. And on a certain date, the slope which was going upwards turned downwards. Now that could be a day's thing or a 7-day average thing. But no, I noticed a consistent downward slope in the 7-day rolling average and even in the daily infections rate. And you know, if you ignore one or two minor bumps upwards, but the general direction follows essentially the same slope, you just project the slope after you've achieved a certain degree of surety that the slope is holding. So the slope must hold. It can't be that it goes down, then it goes up, then goes down. That's, if it keeps doing that, it's not holding really. You can even see it's holding in that sense also, but it requires a little more complicated thinking. But fortunately for us, the Delhi slope was essentially holding along a certain slope. And so that emboldened me. At the same time, you know, I live very close to Ring Road. It's about less than half a kilometer from Ring Road, a very busy part of Ring Road. And on my terrace, I can also see the Ring Road, and I can hear traffic if it makes a particularly loud noise like honking, very loud honking. And when Delhi was at its peak in the second wave fighting COVID, I was counting the number of times I would hear ambulance sirens ferrying patients to hospitals in an emergent situation. And during the peak days, I would get ambulance sirens at the rate of about 3 to 5 in 1 hour on Ring Road, 3 to 5. So I'd say the average would be somewhere around 4 an hour. And then suddenly I noticed that they started declining. Even during the lockdown, sirens were still blaring, but after a certain time, they started declining. And on 6th May, I was very confident that the number of emergency situations where patients had to be immediately taken to a hospital from different sources, and the place where I stay connects with many, many neighborhoods which are either densely populated or are fairly sort of well-known neighborhoods where there are all kinds of human population habitats. And I saw that on the 6th of May, I was certain that we were not getting more than 5 ambulance sirens in a whole day, daytime. I'm not sure what is happening in the middle of the night, but I was very certain that the night was not going to be very different because the pattern was holding, not more than 5. And that has held for all these days. I also looked at simple other sources, and I urged teachers connected with any kind of studies, not just maths, not just statistics, to bring these everyday practical insights into our classrooms, into our drawing room discussions. It improves the quality of human discourse, makes us think a little better. So I got in touch with one of our most prominent labs. It's a commercial enterprise, and they had been overwhelmed with requests for testing for COVID. They were completely flooded. But on the 6th of May, I was confident that for the last several days before that, the pressure on that lab had eased up like anything. And this lab has networks across the city. It's not just located at one place. And they reported that the pressure had really eased up. So that was my second data reference. 1, the ambulances. 2, this lab. 3, you know, I looked at certain neighborhoods in Delhi, randomly chosen where I could connect with people. And I'll give you just one example. There are many that I was in touch with. So if you look at the Asian Games village, of course, that's a slightly upper class village neighborhood. But I will also come to this point in a short while, if I have the time. Before the 6th of May, they had something like 156 active cases. And then they had begun to decline. And the decline was pretty sharp. In the last 24 hours, they've not had a single case. And about just after the 6th of May, they had only 61 active cases. So you can see that it's been pretty sharp. And I looked at other neighborhoods and the story was almost similar. So that's the other thing that was giving me confidence. Then I spoke to private practitioners who were doing online consultations in lower end neighborhoods, not the upper end. Some of them were in almost semi-rural areas, not exactly village. And they got back to me collectively to say on the 6th of May that for the week before that, they had seen on an average about a 60% reduction in the number of cases they were handling online. And since then, it's been reducing, coming back to almost the same situation as it would be for a regular physician who's sort of practicing online or in a clinic. That also gave me enormous strength. And based on that, I then decided to be pretty confident, and I sort of made my prayers and made a prediction that between the 10th and 15th of May, Delhi will see a dramatic reduction. This was on the 6th of May. And the day I made that prediction, on the 6th of May, there were 19,000 active new cases that had happened, 6th of May. Yesterday, there were 10,000 new active cases. So fortunately, and thank God for that, Delhi has sort of looks like begun to come out of the woods. We're not out yet, but we're in a far better situation. I also managed to find some people at the GTB hospital across the river in the Shahadra region. Just on the 11th of April, I have a photograph of the emergency ward of that hospital, and you wouldn't want to look at that picture. And on the 10th of May, that emergency ward of the GDP hospital is completely empty. Completely, the emergency ward. There are two reasons that you could cite. Of course, the number of patients. I spoke to the doctors there, and they attend to all kinds of people across the river in the Shahada region and beyond also. And the doctors told me that, no, the beds are all empty. There aren't any emergency cases that are turning up for COVID. So you can see that Delhi has begun to see the light at the end of the tunnel. We have to keep praying. We have to be very careful. We have to wear masks. We keep social distancing. Don't go out and meet people. Stay indoors. Do your best. But if you keep doing that, I am now wagering with His grace that by the end of May, Delhi will see an enormous amount of light. So let's just keep that in mind. Why am I telling you this? Because largely I have a college audience. You should bring this kind of precise, somewhat rigorous analysis and insights, no matter whether you're teaching political science or history or mathematics or literature. It helps in improving our intellectual capabilities. That's why I brought this story to your attention. And I'll now get on to the global situation and how, with the help of science and technology, some interesting things are happening in the fight against COVID. Of course, we have vaccines. And they are our single most important source of strength. And I'm sure all of us are now completely aware of how those vaccines are working and what they are doing. We have all kinds of vaccines, a plethora of vaccines, the ones that you inject. But maybe you're not aware that as I speak, news has come in one of the most prestigious journals, Nature, probably the most prestigious science journal, that a new vaccine is being developed, which has shown enormous promise, not just against COVID. So it handles a whole bunch of viruses from this family, SARS, MERS, all of them will be handled by this single vaccine. And in the trials that have taken so far, that have been undertaken so far, it has shown enormous promise. That's why Nature allowed it to be reported. So you can see that there is light on the horizon. Mankind will win this fight. Believe me, we will win this fight. And I predict, once again, with his grace and with his strength, that by a year's time, when we meet again, if Jnanotosh remembers and wishes to invite a fraud like me, we can meet 1 year from now and mankind will have brought COVID very much under control. It may stay, as people say, for, like endemic situations and this and that, but it will no longer be a threat that we have had with it so far. I also want to draw attention to some very interesting things which are amazingly simple to think of. The ingenuity with humankind is trying to implement that in the fight against COVID is very interesting. So, I don't know how many of you were aware, but a little less than a year ago, a Nobel laureate, Louis Ignarro from the United States, from California, wrote a letter to the British Pharmacological Journal. It's a prestigious journal, and a Nobel laureate writes a letter which was published in full, in which he suggested that here was a natural way in which we could do something to combat COVID. What did he suggest? So Ignarro got his Nobel Prize for his work on nitric oxide, the gas nitric oxide. Because of his work, thousands of newborn babies have been saved from dying. They were given nitric oxide right at the time when they were suffering and were turning blue, and the nitric oxide revived them. And that continues to be the situation. It is used to save newborn babies from a certain kind of affliction. And Ignarro is an expert on nitric oxide. And here's what he said, that the nasal cavities in humans produces natural nitric oxide. And he said when we inhale through the nose, this nitric oxide accumulates in our lungs as well. And it's a powerful antimicrobial agent. It kills viruses. So what he suggested was very simple. And I'll lead you to technology in a moment, but hear me out. What he had suggested was, not many paid attention to what he said. He said, if we inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth, then the nitric oxide goes into your lungs each time it is produced in your nasal cavity. If you exhale through the nose, then it also gets washed out. So don't exhale, but inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth, and do that about gently 15 times in one cycle. And repeat this cycle 3 to 4 times in a day. Gently inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. And do this 15 times. And repeat this cycle 4 times, 5 times in a day. It has many other benefits, as Ignarro himself said. It calms and relaxes the mind and the body also if you sit down and do it in a gentle way. It does, believe me. More importantly, it tends to harm the COVID virus because of the nitric oxide that goes from the nasal passage into the air passages into your lungs. That's a very remarkable and simple insight, but people didn't seem to pay much attention. Incidentally, and I'm not one of those obscurantists or chauvinists who says कि हमारे यहाँ प्राचीन में सब कुछ मालूम था, सब विज्ञान हो गया था. I don't believe in that. But yes, there is wisdom in many things that our ancients have done. I'm reminded of an exercise in yoga called Simhasana, where the essence is to inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. And it says that if you have kinds of irritations or beginnings of infection in your air passages and your throat, it kills that. I have actually, because I'm familiar with Simhasana, I have practiced it, but I had forgotten it in the last few years. Till essentially Louis Ignarro, the Nobel laureate, reminded me of his practice, which is quite similar to Simhasana. And now I understand why in yoga they say that Simhasana clears off your throat infections and things like that. I understand that now pretty well. But here's something very, very interesting that happened. There's a biotechnologist from Israel who's essentially in Canada. He has set up a biotechnology startup called Sanitize. They probably picked up this idea from Intradermal. Probably. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm making a guess here. Anyway, they picked up this idea of nitric oxide. And they have developed a nasal spray, a simple nasal spray, which you spray into both your nostrils. And they have conducted trials in Britain with the help of 2 or 3 agencies in Britain, including an agency connected to the National Health Service of Britain. In April, their results were out, and they found that this nasal spray, which you sort of spray into both nostrils, within 24 hours, it reduces the viral load to an extent of 94%. That's huge. And in 72 hours, it almost completely removes the virus. It's almost 99%. That is quite a breakthrough. I've been trying to track information as little as I've understood as a non-prescription over-the-counter nasal spray. It is now available in Bahrain and Israel. But Sanitize is trying to come up with more data and is talking to authorities in Britain, Canada, and even in the United States to be allowed to conduct these trials and conclude that Sanitize will work in the fight against COVID. This doesn't mean that you're not going to use vaccines. Please let me repeat again. The real one thing that will really control this virus and bring it into complete control would be vaccines. All these things will be just aids along the way. So you can be complementary things. You could use complementary things. Sanitize is one of them. There are other people who are doing similar things. I'll tell you a very interesting story about a young Indian academic at the South Dakota State University in the United States. His name is Saikat Basu. During the second phase, Basu and his family from the United States visited his relatives in Calcutta. And Basu had not been vaccinated yet in the United States. So you can see that he and his family had not had the vaccine. And Basu had developed a technique that allowed him to be comparatively well protected against COVID, even though he was in the middle of Calcutta, in the midst of the second wave. So what was Basu doing? What he had done was, he just used a simple idea. We know that iodine is a very strong antimicrobial agent. And there is a registered trademark medication called betadine that uses an iodine-based solution called povidone or something like that. All Basu had done was he had devised a nasal spray. He and his colleagues in the US had devised a nasal spray, which he has an article on LinkedIn. They're still working on things, they're developing it, but he has an article on LinkedIn. Saikat Basu, South Dakota State University, you'll find the article on LinkedIn. And he tells you how to, it's a non-prescription thing. Betadine is available all over the counter, and you can gargle. People when they get throat infections, they gargle with it. So all Saikat was doing was, he was inserting this spray bottle which had a certain solution based on iodine, the betadine solution, and he would spray it into both nostrils and gargle with it. Every day of his stay, 2 or 3 times in a day while he was in Calcutta with his family. Well, this is anecdotal evidence, but he went back with his family safe and sound. And it seems to me to make sense. Saikat is not to be taken lightly. He's an acknowledged scientist. And I think, as I have understood, they are developing this idea further. So these are things that tend to miss media attention and not sort of bring to the attention of the public. But these are useful things. And I believe from amongst the many things that I'm going to cite, some of these will eventually make their presence felt on the global horizon. There are other kinds of sprays that are being developed. By the way, I mean, Saikat's idea was also taken up, maybe not because of him, but by researchers in the United Kingdom and even in Singapore. And they had pretty good results with that. So it does work. And please do look out for this. I think once in a while, you should just sit down with your search engine, use Google or whichever engine you use, and try and look at this kind of data. And you will find interesting things that are happening in their own modest ways in this global fight against COVID. And as I've told you, make no mistake, vaccines are our biggest weapon. And I told you that the most recent news that has come today itself, published in Nature, that there is this new vaccine coming on the horizon, which will fight a whole range of these coronaviruses. And the results are very, very promising. So I have great hope over there. There's another kind of nasal spray that has been sort of developed in Argentina. So I have noticed that is comparatively not so well-known centers of science research. They're all working on these kinds of ideas. And I noticed that science has now established itself in good ways in many parts of the world. So Argentina is using a kind of nasal spray that comes from an algae. And that's also giving us very promising results. They took 394 people who were frontline health workers working in the ICU treating COVID patients. And they performed some trials with them using, of course, double-blind study. And they found that actually it seems this spray that they have developed using this algae-based solution, it brought the levels of infection down. It reduced them to 1% of the population. So it seemed to be, as opposed to the placebo group. So that also seems to be very, very promising. And so I think that's something we should look out for. There's another spray, nasal spray, that is now available to all of Europe and Britain over the counter. It's called Viralise. It's also an antiviral solution based on sodium. And you just spray it over into the nostrils, and it gives you fairly good relief. And if you do it several times, it gives you a great deal of protection. Once again, it's not a replacement for vaccines, but this is now available in all of Europe, online, and in England. You could go to a pharmacy, just buy the spray and start using it, keep it in your pocket as you move around. It provides good protection. It's not a surefire cure, but it has very good, very promising results. And I believe that people should start using such devices. I hope to God that they also come into India. I'm told reliably that Sanitize has tried to approach the Indian authorities and private companies, and it may well be that Sanitize and even Viralise may be available in India soon enough. There's another spray. That's a very interesting spray. It has been developed by a firm in Switzerland. That's also very promising. These are all nasal sprays, and that's what I'm sort of trying to bring to your attention today. This nasal vaccine uses, it's a vaccine, but it's sprayed in the nose, in the nostrils, and this uses a natural substance which is produced by the body. It's called HCLO, and don't ask me what all these things mean. These are technical biological terms. Suffice it to say that the toxicity of this concentrate that they use from the body that produces this substance is very little, and it is quite effective against the virus. And so watch out for it. In about 1 minute, it seems to clear the virus and all its mutant variations also. I mean, that's very, very effective. So this is being developed in Switzerland by this private company, and it has caught the attention of scientists in many parts of the world, even in the United States. United States have replicated the same results that the people in Switzerland have done. So there is a lot of promise with even this vaccine. In addition to all this, and I just wanted to tell you something, in addition to all this, I wanted to say that there is another simple yogic technique, which is very, very important. It's called Jal Neti. You take water at a reasonable temperature, don't make it too hot, and you sort of pass it from one nostril and take it out through the other and reverse it in the other direction with a small container, a small vessel. It has a spout in it. And there are more modern versions which have motors which make it really easy to do that. And it washes away anything in the nasal passages. So if you do that once or twice in a day, viruses and other germs that could be harmful get washed out completely. And the person who brought this to my attention was Morarji Desai when he was Prime Minister of India. And there was something interesting he had told me. He said he would never have a cold. He said every time he felt he had a cold coming on, he would do something very simple with the Jal Neti. He would pass water through one and take it out, both nostrils, clean up his nasal passage. And then he said he would take lukewarm water with a certain saline solution and drink it through his nostrils into his stomach. And he says the cold virus would be completely washed away. And in fact, he said it would kill the virus. And he said he had never had a cold in his life. And I believe there is sense in there. Jal Neti is highly recommended in yoga simply for these reasons. It's a good health forming habit. So I think we should pay attention to that also. And I think all these nasal sprays are just following up on our own ideas that we understood in the past about the importance of the nasal passages and the breathing techniques. I'm told I do not have any data like the data that Louis Ignaro has given, that there is nitric oxide being produced in our nasal passages. That kind of data I don't have, but I have heard from many people that even the Brahmari pranayam allows you to sort of produce nitric oxide in our air passages, nasal cavities, and it also weakens the virus, if not completely kills it. There is no harm in trying these. These are simple techniques you do 2 or 3 times in a day, each time for about 3 minutes or so. There's no harm, no taxation on this. And I think we should be paying attention to that. There's a nasal spray that has just been developed by Cadila in Ahmedabad. So here's the interesting story about this Cadila medication. Many years ago, about 10 years ago, the scientists at Cadila, and I've been talking to the chief scientist there, he's a very distinguished scientist, Dr. Bakulesh Kamar. He had informed me that about 10 years ago or so, they had developed an intradermal vaccine for tuberculosis. So this intradermal vaccine for tuberculosis was injected gently under the skin, and it would give you immunity against tuberculosis. Incidentally, it is very bad for anyone to die under any circumstances for any reason. But I'm not sure if our audience here is aware that how many people in India die every day from tuberculosis. About 2,000 or more. Each day they die from tuberculosis in India. It's a large number. 2,000 or more daily deaths due to tuberculosis in India. I do not know if those people who have these severe forms of tuberculosis, when they're infected with COVID, what happens? Is it a kind of comorbidity situation? I have no data on that. But just to bring things into the right perspective, 2,000 people on an average die in India every day because of tuberculosis. So Cadila came up with this vaccine, and then they realized it's very effective against leprosy. So it also was being sold under prescription for treatment of leprosy. Effective, very effective. So what does Sepsivac do? As I have understood, you must have heard of a term called cytokine storm in the context of COVID. Well, what this storm is all about, it's simply an overreaction of the body's immune system against the virus. And when there is a high overreaction, the body gets overwhelmed with that, and then humans succumb to that reaction. COVID patients tend to die in large numbers because of that. And what Sepsivac has been doing in the context of leprosy is that it quells the cytokine storm. So Dr. Kamar thought that it should work against COVID also. And in the trials that they have conducted, so I know of a university in the National Capital Region where they looked at 200 frontline people who were being exposed to COVID all the time. And they conducted this trial where they were in constant exposure because of their activities to COVID. And they noticed that it gave them about an 85% protection. So it seems to be working. This is not the only piece of data. Dr. Kamar has a fair amount of data on this. On the basis of that, he and his team have developed now a simple nasal spray based on Sepsivac, which you just spray once into your nostrils, both nostrils, and it will give you immunity for almost a year. So a strong amount of immunity, that's what they're claiming. And I believe that this should also work. Dr. Kamar is a highly respected scientist, and I believe there is a lot of sense in what he's saying, and we should wait for more data as time goes by. Hopefully, even that will work. In addition to that, I just wanted you to know that there are countries across the globe, and I would like to just bring you the names of China, India, US, UK, Cuba, Iran, who are all working on, this is data provided by the WHO on a certain kind of vaccine. And these are various stages, and they're all looking pretty promising. It's not as dramatic as the one that has been reported in Nature, which I told you that I learned today. But still, they are very interesting phases of their trials. And they are working on an immunoglobulin called IgA, which sort of gives you a good natural defense against COVID. And they have done remarkable work with that. So they're all in different stages, but the ideas are pretty ingenious, different ideas. Iran has a lab where they're conducting these trials. Cuba has its own lab. And these are serious scientists. The United States has, of course, many people working on these ideas. And in addition to that, I have noticed that the United States has a plethora of biotechnology companies which have put technology and artificial intelligence to good use. So they have been running through all kinds of pharmaceutical formulations using artificial intelligence to see if these molecules could somehow fight the COVID virus. So they know the complete structure of the virus, and using artificial intelligence, and they have come up with a range of pharmaceutical formulations. And they're now going to try them in their trials. So this is technology which has come to the aid of medicine. And I believe that if you look at this entire range that I've given you, outside the area, the core area of developing the vaccines, which is now coming out to be very fruitful. The vaccine area has been so fruitful. Today, I noticed that the United States President has issued an advisory, approved an advisory, where in the United States, if you have had both your vaccine shots, either from Pfizer or Moderna, you need not wear a mask in many places. You are allowed not to be with a mask. You are safe. And you can see that the United States has quelled the COVID fire to a great extent, and that's largely because of the vaccination program. So we must rely on vaccines. And I am hoping and I am expecting that in times to come, in the next few days or next few weeks, India will launch a vigorous vaccination program. And the sooner we do it, the better for us. Vaccination is the first and foremost thing. But all these supplementary things that I have told you about, from them, if 2 or 3 turn out to be as they are showing promise for, then we will have, between the vaccines and these devices, probably fought and won the battle against COVID. Well, Gyanatosh, essentially, all that I wanted to say has been summarized. There is something that is outside the realm of these vaccines or chemicals, but it is in the realm of nanotechnology. And I would like to just mention it very briefly. There is a substance connected with nanotechnology called graphene. And I am aware of companies in Canada, now in the US, and even an Indian startup that have made masks using graphene for the virus. In the test results that I have come across, and as little as I believe them to be true, these graphene masks, of course, there is a danger with graphene that sometimes it leaches. But except for a company from a certain country which was careless with those masks, all the other mask-making companies have proper, regular certifications from high-end agencies which tell us that the graphene usage that they have used, that they have employed, is safe and it does not leach or it does not harm. This graphene mask not only stops the virus, 99% and more. So it's pretty effective, but it also kills the virus. So this is a very interesting technology, just using graphene masks. And I noticed that this startup in India, and they claim that they are also now marketing in the US. So I believe that if they are successful, this would be a good protective device against corona. I think the effectiveness is about 99 point some percent against the coronavirus. Not only prevents it from entering your body's passages, it also kills the virus, unlike other masks. So I believe this is also a very promising development. Now, as I've been told, these masks are available in India. You could order them from anywhere, but do check out. I mean, don't just believe what I say. For your own sake, check carefully everything you have to, and let yourself be convinced by your own intellect, and then you take your decisions. But these masks are catching on, and not just in India, in other parts of the world also. Well, I'm done with what I had to say. This is my version of those ideas which haven't got so much media attention as some of the major vaccines, but which I believe could possibly make a difference in the global fight against COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dinesh, for such exciting session, and we'll now move on to our question and answer round. So we have few questions which we'd like to ask you. The first question is, which mathematical model is best in predicting COVID spread?
There is no model as such. You just have to use a certain amount of data in an intelligent way. And it is my feeling that to model India would be very difficult. However, for the sake of the audience, I've been tracking the Indian data for COVID. I've been looking at the rolling averages and the daily infections. And I don't want to make any predictions, but the curve has turned from going upwards, it has begun to go downwards. Let's pray it's flattening and it's probably reducing also. Let's just pray that it continues on a downward slope. And I think that what we need to do is have good, reliable sources of data, not just from the data that we find on our websites, but use data from different sources. But you must be careful that that's reliable data. You have to use reliable data. India is a vast country. To map India through a data lens is not easy. But I have reason to believe that the Indian story on COVID is going to get better from now, even though we will keep hearing all kinds of sad stories, all kinds of tragic occurrences. It's going to happen. I noticed even in the Delhi situation, in the first wave and even now, that from the time the number of infections start going down, and even if they go down dramatically, like May 6th, there were 19,000 and yesterday there were only 10,000. So it's a dramatic reduction. But the number of deaths doesn't go down immediately. There is a time lag, because these are people who are infected, just a few days ago, and it takes time to develop, then they die. God forbid that happens, but it happens. And so the number of deaths will not go down as the infections go down. There's a time lag of about 10 days. But my belief is that in June, India will see far better days. And let's all pray for that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dinesh. We have next question. And the question is, we have a lot of vaccine hesitancy in rural India. So how, as you can change that mindset? Your thoughts on that?
Let me tell you something. There is nothing better than data. You convince people by citing the data of United Kingdom. They were in a bad situation, almost as bad as India's, till they started vaccinating. And you see a dramatic reduction. Now things have eased up. My friends in the UK now go to pubs. They go and meet their neighbors. They get together for small gatherings. Do you see the dramatic difference? And they did only one thing really. They were following all of the practices, masks, this, that. But the dramatic change happened and it happened in 2-3 months. Why? Because they started a vigorous vaccination program. And what vaccine are they using? The same Covishield vaccine that we are using in India. So believe me, it's really that if you can get down the data for UK, the data for USA, and show them, even Portugal and countries, other places where you can find good, reliable data that they were in a bad situation until they started vaccinating, and then suddenly they are in a good situation. They lead almost normal lives. Then you will convince people. If you just keep telling them, no, no, get vaccinated, it's good for you, they're not going to be convinced. Tell them two dramatic stories. When I was a child, each year, all of us children used to get vaccinated with the smallpox virus vaccine each year. And then suddenly, when I was a student at Delhi University, 70s, I think it was 76, 77, when India became smallpox free. There was no medicine for smallpox. Nothing works, only vaccines. Tell them from the scourge of smallpox, India came out completely free because of the vaccine. Otherwise, you can believe in anything, thousands would die each year. As recently, when I was a student, around 74, 75, hundreds and hundreds of people in Bihar died because of smallpox. But all that is gone. Similarly, polio. You know, I had a sibling a little older than me who died because of polio. There was no polio vaccine then. But now look, there are no polio cases in India as far as I know. It's been eradicated from India. Why? The dramatic difference has come because of the vaccine. So vaccines work, and just cite data, smallpox, polio in India's context, and then show them the data for USA, UK for the vaccines. And UK is using the same vaccine that many of us use in India. And I believe that's the only way you can convince people to get vaccinated. Do that in smart, intelligent, non-aggressive ways. Simple data convinces people like anything.
And, we have next question. That is, what are your thoughts on the next wave of COVID-19? Will it happen? And if it happens, what will be the implications?
I mean, as I said, I'm a layperson. Don't sort of expect too much from me. But I'll tell you one thing. I'm making an intelligent guess. And I believe it will work. I think in early June, India will launch a vigorous vaccination program. I think we are trying to procure vaccines from many sources. And if we are successful in that, there will be no third wave. If we are successful, look, I mean, New York has been through two really bad waves, but once the vaccination started, New York is back to normal. There's nothing else happening now. Vaccinate, vaccinate, and vaccinate. And I believe India will. Right now, we're not vaccinating too much. There is a shortage. We all know that. But let's all be optimistic. It's in our interest to be optimistic, because if you're optimistic, don't be foolish. Don't be foolhardy. But keep your mind in a good, positive state, and your body generates the right kind of things that help you fight. It improves your immune system also. So stay optimistic, and I believe that India will not allow the third wave because of its good vaccination program, which I expect will happen sometime.
Yes, sir. I'm sure that we'll overcome this like we overcame polio with polio drops. This will also most certainly happen. So, sir, the next question is regarding the immunity building system for our bodies. Isn't it true that traditional methods that have been ignored till now, do they have any effects, or are they in some way helping us right now? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yes and no. I mean, there is no harm in building up your immunity, but all those traditional Indian systems were not working against smallpox. They were not working against polio. I don't know why. I'm not running down the Indian systems. I have seen them do miraculous things. But until we have hard scientific proof, don't follow anything. I mean, there is no harm if you keep consuming tulsi, holy basil. No harm, because there are enough results to show that it has strong antiviral properties. So there is no harm. I know of a researcher, a biology researcher, frontline researcher, who has come up with remarkable results in the last few months on the use of giloy, guduchi. I think the Tinosporia cordifilia, I think is that the technical name, scientific name for it? Giloy, we call it giloy or guduchi, in treating cancer. So, but it's all in the lab, okay? And giloy is really used for anti-inflammatory properties in India in the Ayurveda. So look, and there are no side effects. So there is no harm if you consume giloy, if you consume tulsi, holy basil. No harm comes to you. In the Indian tradition, it has been accepted that these do build immunity. But to rely solely on that, or to say this is the frontline fight, until we have scientific evidence, we shouldn't do that.
Sir, the next question is regarding, we are getting a lot of data. How do you think, how much of you think is it correct in context of COVID?
Nothing like exact. We are not God. Okay, nothing is exact. We're always approximating. I said that at the beginning, that I'm trying to box the actual picture inside inexact data. So I know the outer boundaries of the inexact data, and I know that beyond this, if I go inside, it will not be exact. But that much allows me a certain region of exactness. That's all. And look, I mean, India is not very good at data. And much of my data is anecdotal in the sense that I've been collecting it through personal efforts. Now I've been joined by a colleague who's sort of giving it a little more sort of weight. A very young colleague who's actually not a scientist nor a data expert, but he thinks like a mathematician and he's doing some good work. Hopefully we will try and write this up in a day or so. But there is nothing like exact data, nothing.
So, sir, the next question is regarding gel making. Do you think it is helpful in COVID? That is what the question is.
I mean, it makes sense. If you use the Jal Neti technique, it just washes out viruses and germs in your nasal passages. And remember, COVID attacks you through the nasal passages. That's how it enters the lung. So in the first line of defense, if you use this properly, it should help. I mean, this is not a cure. Please believe me, it's not a cure. I see no harm, but always talk to your doctor, your physician. Please consult them. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a technical person. I'm not a physician. So I'm just giving you anecdotal stuff. I told you what Morarji Desai told me, that every time he felt he had a cold coming on, he would use Jal Neti and then he would just drink the water. After cleaning his nasal passages, he would drink the water, warm saline water, through his nostrils. And he said the virus would be completely removed. This is his version. But Jal Neti seems to have an effect. Every time I've had a cold in the last few years, I've seen that Jal Neti makes a difference to me. Common sense tells you that it should also help wash out the coronavirus. That's all. There is no scientific study. Remember that.
Thank you so much for that answer, sir. And the next question we have is that there are a lot of new mutations that are popping up and coming up in India. So, do you think we need a better national strategy to overcome this crisis?
No matter what strategy you have, there is always room for improvement. And certainly, India would be better served if our national strategy improves in a significant way. And I'm hoping, I pray for the well-being of my nation, like all of you. And I'm hoping that wisdom will prevail and we will come up with a good national strategy. Look, in the first wave, even the United States didn't seem to have a strategy. They were suffering badly. But they have learned, and good people have come to the fore, and they have devised good ways of handling COVID, and the United States is now comparatively at ease. And I'm hoping that similar strategies will begin to develop in India. The sooner we learn that, the better.
Thank you, sir. There is a question about safeguarding children. If you would like to answer that.
How to safeguard children? As little as I know, vaccines are being modified, or the same ones are now being sort of tested on children. And hopefully, in the next few weeks or months, we will have vaccines for children above 12 at least. But children must always be kept in a protected environment. The virus seems to affect everyone. I don't think small children should wear masks. Apparently, it's not good. But consult your doctors. Keep them protected. Don't allow them to be exposed, and give them good immunity boosting, diets and stuff like that. And I think things like amla and tulsi and haldi and those things. If the children, children cannot easily like these things, but I'm told that you can get tulsi and amla in capsules so they can easily swallow them. Even turmeric is available in capsules. Keep them protected. I'm hoping that at least for children about 12, there might be vaccines very soon on the horizon.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dinesh, for this enlightening session. I'm sure together with proper precautions and following all the guidelines and keeping ourselves safe, we'll overcome this COVID-19 pandemic together and we'll be stronger than ever. So thank you so much for your kind words, and it was a very enlightening session for all of us here at Show. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.